Hi guys, welcome back to Padhai Logic. So today we are tackling our IoT Unit 4 for your BCA exams. So if you have ever looked at the past questions of IoT, you would know that this unit is notorious for its security threats and application of IoT heavy 10 marks question. So don't panic. In this video, we aren't just going to memorize the definition, we are going to look at the exact challenges. We'll talk about what are the applications and unpack the security threats with the real world example. Right, so let's dive straight in. First, we'll talk about the IoT challenges. Alright, so if there is a question stating that is IoT prone to development and designing challenge, then your first sentence must be bold that yes, absolutely, IoT is prone to development and designing challenges. So what is the scenario? You see, building an IoT system isn't like writing a standard software app. It is not like a software app. Alright. So in IoT, you are trying to force the physical hardware components to seamlessly talk with the digital cloud network. And this concept introduced 5 massive challenges. Alright, 5 massive challenges that keep the engineers awake at night. So let's break them down so you can write them perfectly in your exam. So the very first challenge is connectivity and interoperability. Alright, so think of interoperability as a massive language barrier. Alright, it is a massive language barrier. So you have thousands of devices out there, all using different wireless tongues, right? Some of them are talking using Zigbee, some of them are talking using LoRaWAN, or some are using Wi-Fi, right? So these are the different tongues, these are different languages, right? So what is the challenge? Making a sensor from brand A to seamlessly talk with the gateway from brand B. Alright, and knowing that this and this tongue language, this both are completely different, right? For example, imagine a smart agriculture setup. So you have a soil moisture sensor from one manufacturer, but it cannot communicate with the water valve actuator from the other manufacturer. So both the manufacturers are different. Alright, so because they use different protocols, they are not able to communicate. So what is the result? Your crops dry up and die, and even though the data was sitting right there, this is an interoperability failure, right? So there is a problem in communication. This is the very first problem, right? Second is the power management. So most IoT sensors are deployed in rough, inaccessible places, like some are buried deep down in the agriculture soil or mounted high on the city street lights, right? So you can't just run an extension cord to them, and you can't go out to change the AA batteries in them every week, every 2 weeks, right? You can't do that. So developers have to design the hardware that consume microamps of current. Okay, microamps of current, and write highly optimized, highly energy efficient code so that the devices must spend 99% of their time in deep sleep. All right, they spend their 99% of the time in deep sleep, and so that what happens, they are just waking up for a fraction of time, like for a second, to transmit the data. So they wake up for a second, like half a second, and they transmit the data to wherever required, and they fall back sleep again. So this is how the energy efficient code is written by the engineers to maintain power, right? And if we talk about scalability, this is the another challenge which need to be addressed. So if your cloud servers work perfectly with 10 prototype meters in a lab, that's great. But what happens when a city rolls out 10,000, I would say not 10,000, 1 lakh meters? What will happen in this scenario? If it is working well with 10 prototypes, we cannot state that it will work out with 1 lakh smart meters as well, right? So what happens? The network architecture must scale dynamically to handle massive spike, to handle as far as the network is required simultaneously without crashing the infrastructure. That is what scalability is. So the architecture, the network architecture should be built and designed in such a way that even if it is required to scale to add multiple devices, it does not crash. All right. Then comes the data volume and management. So IoT sensors generate an absolute tsunami of raw data every single second. And if you try to upload every single raw data packet to the cloud, your network bandwidth will choke and your cloud storage bill would bankrupt you, right? So the challenge here is implementing edge computing. All right, which means teaching the sensor or the local gateway to process the data locally inside that. All right, so internally process the data, filter out the noise, whatever noise is, and send only the critical alerts to the cloud, so that the cloud is only storing the data which is required and unnecessary storage bill is not created. All right, and then there is environmental reliability. So unlike a laptop that sits in an air conditioner office, right, IoT hardware has a very different life. It is not like a laptop. It lives in a wild. So it faces extreme heat. It faces sub-zero winter temperatures, humidity, dust, and heavy physical vibrations as well. So if the causing or circuit boards aren't ruggedized, if they aren't protected, if they are not rough and tough, the system will fail physically, right? And the system will fail long before the software does. And that leads to a very unreliable system. That is why environmental reliability becomes a very crucial concept in IoT. Alright, I hope you are able to understand the concept. And yes, IoT has development and design challenges, and we have stated all the 5 challenges, and we have talked about an example of smart agriculture. And I would request you to pause the video and relate each and every one of this with the smart agriculture example, and let yourself revise what the concept is and relate it, so that you will able to write the topics easily in your exam. Now let's move on to the single most critical part of Unit 4, that is IoT security issues. This is an absolute favorite for external examiners. Why? Because when software bug happen on a computer, you lose the data, right? But when an IoT device get hacked, the physical things break in the real world. So someone can unlock your front door, right? Or shut down a city power grid. That is why it becomes a major challenge, and it is very important to address it. All right, so let's look at the 3 core security vulnerabilities and how to address those things. So first we'll talk about data privacy. All right, so IoT devices are essentially round the clock digital spies. You see, they monitor your habits, they monitor your location and your environment 24/7. So they are like digital spies which are constantly monitoring you, right? So what the thing is, if the data traveling from a sensor to the gateway isn't encrypted, all right, if it is not protected, if it is not converted into some keywords to avoid any kind of people to hack it, right? If it is not encrypted, so malicious actors or hackers can intercept it. And what will happen if this sensitive data is stored insecurely on a third party cloud server, for example? then what will happen? Your entire daily routine would be exposed. So these are the major threat that happens with the IoT devices. All right, so you see, we have third party sharing, which I just talked about, that if our data is stored in the external cloud server, what will happen, right? So, and also to ensure that the data collection is adhering to the legal standards like GDPR protocol. It is also a significant challenge for the developers of these IoT devices, right? So what is the solution? What is the resolution? So it is very important to enforce a strict end-to-end encryption for all the data, either it is in transit, either it is at rest, it is at a third party sharing app. All right, so it needs to be encrypted alongside ensuring that there is a strict compliance with the framework like GDPR. All right, so these are the things you need to maintain. Next comes the authentication. So authentication means proving a device is exactly who it claims to be before letting it join the network. All right, so it is the authentication is the process of verifying the identity of the device. So what is the threat in this case? The number one blunder in IoT history is authentication, So what happens? The shipping devices with hard coded universal default passwords like admin or 1234, what happens? Hackers use automated script to scan the internet for those and open these doors, right? So these easy passwords are automatically, they have a script, they just wrote it down and they hack your internet. Additionally, many tiny sensors that lack the screens or keypads, making it tough to use regular multi-factor authentication, becomes another threat, right? So what happens? What is the resolution? What we can do in this particular scenario? We can enforce a mandatory password change on the first boot and completely ban the hard-coded credentials. And we can use digital certificates. Okay, we can use particular things to authenticate every single hardware node. So that is how you will be able to maintain the authentication. Next comes the network attack. So this is how hackers weaponize and disrupt the communication channels. Alright, so you need to know these 4 terms for your exams. First, we have DDoS attack. I hope you are already aware of it. So it is the distributed denial of services. What happens? Hackers compromise millions of insecure smart devices to create a giant robot army that is known as botnet. And then they order this botnet to flood the target server with billions of fake requests and knocking major websites or corporate network completely offline. All right, and then we also have a man in the middle. It is known as MITM. Okay, so an attacker, what happens? An attacker injects themselves right between the sensor. So there is a sensor and a gateway, and it injects themselves right between them. And they are silently reading and altering all the data packets mid-flight. Alright, for example, imagine a MITM attack intercepting an ICU patient heart data monitor. So if, for example, the hacker alerts the data packet to show a normal heart rate when the patient is actually experiencing a cardiac arrest. So what they did is they alter it. So the doctor sees that, okay, there is a healthy dashboard, right? There is no cardiac arrest signs or nothing like that. So what happens? Doctor does not realize that there is something happening leading to a fatal delay in treatment, right? So this is how hackers alters and silently read the data packet and make changes according to what they require. All right, and it is a very harmful thing. And then there is eavesdropping and jamming as well. Eavesdropping and jamming. So what is this? Eavesdropping is silently listening to the unencrypted wireless transmission. And what is jamming? It is the flooding the wireless frequency with radio noise. So what happens? The sensors physically cannot transmit their alert to the gateway. There is a noise that is just passed out, or there's just complete silence. That is jamming. So they're they're stopping the traffic, they're stopping the transmit of the data packet. So what is the resolution in such scenario? So to secure the transport layer, we should use TLS or DTLS protocols and implement firewalls on gateways and use spread spectrum frequency hopping to counter the wireless jamming. So this is how we are able to overcome the security issues which are in IoT, which is a major challenge, major challenge while developing and maintaining the IoT network. Alright team, so here is an ultimate Padhai Logic exam hack. So if you get a 10 marker question asking you to explain any IoT application, whether it is smart home, smart street light or smart health, and you don't know what to write exactly, you just forget what is the key pointers, etc. So just remember these 6 universal pillars that will save you in your exams, right? So even if you don't remember any of those, you just have to remember these. Structure your answers using these 6 universal pillars, and you know that examiners love structural framework, right? And it guarantees you cover every single technical layer. All right, so let's memorize them right now. So the very first layer we need to point out is the perception layer. Alright, so this is the physical hardware. Your sensors collecting the data and actuators that are doing the physical work are present in this layer. So if you talk about smart health, so what is happening? What are the perception layer sensor like smart watch? It has a sensor that is collecting the data, collecting your heart rate, right? Collecting your pulse. So what is happening? The perception layer are where the sensors reside. It is the physical hardware. Then comes the connectivity. So the communication bridge is the connectivity, how the data travels, which communication protocol it uses. It uses Wi-Fi, Zigbee, LoRaWAN, etc. Whatever it uses, it comes in the connectivity. Alright, and then comes the data analytics and monitoring. So it turns the raw data into the charts, turns it into the meaningful insights and real-time smartphone dashboard as well. It also sends alert via cloud or edge computing. All right, and what is the impact? It provides user with the real-time monitoring. Then comes the resource optimization. All right, so the financial or environmental goal, it covers in this, like saving electricity, conserving water, or cutting down the response time. Whatever it is, it comes under resource optimization. For example, in terms of smart meters, so the resource optimization would be saving electricity, right? Then comes security and privacy framework. So it is how you lock it down, how you secure your environment. So it includes using encryption and digital certificates to keep hackers out. And sixth is the feedback loop. It is the closed loop system, so that the system doesn't just watch, it acts as well. So there is a complete flow. So what happens? The data is perceived, then it is processed, and based on the processing, it performs a particular act, and it does it automatically without the human intervention. For example, there is a smart watch. It identified that the pulse is going really low, so it automatically calls an emergency ambulance on your phone or calls your doctor, whatever act you have automated on. So there is a feedback loop on that. So these are the 6 pillars. If you remember them, if you ingest it in your brain, you will be able to write it with relation to any of the IoT application, because these layers are widely used in every of the application. So you just need to know which application you are talking about. You should know just a little whereabouts. You can just read about them and remember these 6 pillars and relate it and write it in your answers. You will excel in that. So let's start with the one application we all interact with or dream about, smart home. So think of a traditional house as a collection of isolated islands. Your AC doesn't care if your window is open or not, and your geyser doesn't care if you have left for college or not, right? So a smart home is essentially that gives a house a nervous system. So it integrates the isolated appliances into a single unified network for centralized control. All right, so let's look at the three ways this changes our everyday life. First of all, it controls the climate. So we aren't just talking about turning an AC on with a remote, right? So a smart thermostat like Nest, okay, Nest, what it does, it tracks your daily habits. So if you consistently lower the temperature to, for example, 22 degrees Celsius at 10 p.m., so the Nest, what it does, it tracks your pattern and automates it for you, right? Second is the smart lighting. So the lights that dynamically dim or switch off entirely depending upon the room occupancy or how much natural sunlight is hitting the windows is also a specific application of IoT smart home or IoT devices. And next is the security system. Integrating smart biometric locks and security cameras are the part of security system in a home automation. So if someone tampers with your front door, it doesn't just ring a bell. What it does, it beams a real-time HD video feed directly to your smartphone, no matter where you are in the world. All right, so this is how amazing IoT devices are. So let's talk about the working flow, the technical blueprint, and make sure that you please create a particular architecture of this whatever application you'll be talking about in your exam. All right. So when writing the workflow, remember the rule: perceive, transmit, process, and act. So this is the rule which we talked about in the universal pillar as well. So the very first is the perception layer. It starts with the hardware sensors, right? So the PIR motion sensors detects the moment in the hallway. And for example, there is a sensor, DHT11 sensor. What it does, it reads if there is a spike in ambient room temperature, or for example, smoke detector. You might have seen smoke detectors a lot of places. It catches the micro particles in the air. So this is what is included in the perception layer. Then comes the transmission layer. This is where the sensor don't have a massive compute power, so they instantly ship the raw data across the range of wireless channel using Wi-Fi's or whatever communication channel to the central home or gateway. All right, to the hub. And then comes the processing layer. So once the data is reached to the local gateway or the cloud server, it processes this incoming data against the predefined conditional logic. So there is already a logic that is fitted inside that. So once the data is reached, for example, there is a logic that if the motion, if there is a motion, if the motion is true, and the time, if the time is like something, for example, this, then trigger the light. Okay, then what you do, trigger the light. So this is, for example, a particular a predefined conditional logic that is fitted inside the cloud server or local gateway. And then comes the action. So what happened, the processing engine fires an execution command down to the actuators, and the actuators, for example, like 5V relay module, for example, this actuator, what it does, or for example a smart plug, it physically snaps shut or completely completing the high voltage electrical circuit and powering the appliances. So whatever, for example, if we talk about the triggering light, so what the actuator does, it plug on the light, right? So this is the action layer. Let's move on and discuss about the pros and cons. So it is beneficial, not necessary, but it helps if you write the advantages and disadvantages of the applications. It tells that you have a deep understanding about the concept. So first we'll talk about the advantages. Sorry. So the two massive wins here are convenience and safety. So convenience is that you are managing your entire house from a single app screen, and there is safety as well. It provides it gets the instant pushed alerts if there is a gas leak or there is intruder, because they before they cause any damage, you get the safety alert. So these are the major pros. There are further as well, you can add according to your own will. Next we'll talk about the disadvantages. So first is the initial cost. Buying these premium smart nodes, gateways, and upgrading your traditional switches to the IoT smart switches requires a very upfront investment. Alright. Second, there is the privacy risk. If a hacker intercepts your home automation network data, they can map out your exact daily schedule. They would come to know exactly when do you leave your house, when your house is empty, and they can misuse that particular information against you. Next, let's move forward and discuss about the smart street lights, or it will be also asked as smart cities. So if we talk about the smart city framework, for example, the traditional municipal street lights, they are incredibly dumb. Okay, so what happens, they run on a rigid mechanical timers that, okay, even if there is a sunlight or not, they will get on at 5 p.m. in the evening, and there is no particular system of automation upon which they act, right? So whether it is bustling evening, all right, whether it is an empty road, or whether whatever the scenario is, those massive high voltage bulbs would burn electricity at 100% capacity, even if they're required or not, right? So what happens, the smart street lights, they turn every single light pole into an intelligent, data gathering infrastructure node. So let's talk about the specific applications. First is the adaptive dimming. So the light maintains a low energy baseline, let's say 20% brightness, when the street is empty. Alright, so when the street is empty, there will be only 20% brightness. But the moment the car pass away, or moving a pedestrian approaches, the light ramps to the full power ahead of them, creating a dynamic wave of illumination. That is how adaptive dimming works. And then comes the environmental sensing. Why waste the space, right? City planners mount air quality, noise, and humidity sensor directly onto the light poles, turning the lightning rigid into real-time environmental dashboard as well for the whole city. So this is how we will be able to sense the environment as well, and will not waste the extra space while mounting all the sensors, right? Then we can also talk about automated fault reporting. For example, if a bulb burns, all right, so if it is out of for example, if there is a short circuit, so the pole automatically updates the central database. So there is no more waiting for the citizens to complain, or a city truck to do a manual midnight checkup. The street bulb itself sends the message to the central database, and according to that, the fault is reported, and it is fixed accordingly. Next, we'll talk about the working flow. For what is the technical blueprint? Okay, so notice how the architecture scales out over kilometers here. All right, first we have the perception layer. So here the LDRs, the light dependent resistors, they continuously monitors the ambient, okay, so ambient daylight levels. And what they do, while the built-in proximity or the radar sensors, they watch out if there is any incoming vehicle or not. All right, so they are doing all the things, whatever sensor are required. So there are three in our scenario. There is LDR, okay, there is proximity or radar sensor, and they are maintaining the particular thing. They are making sure that the light is measured, the proximity is measured, and they are able to understand if there is someone coming or not. Next is the edge analysis. So instead of waiting for a slow cloud response, there is a local controller which is embedded directly inside the light pole, which instantly process the sensor reading and decide whether to dim the light or brighten the bulb in milliseconds. Alright, so there is no slow response. It is immediately happening in milliseconds. Then comes the reporting. So the local controller packages the health and consumption matrices and sends it over a long distance using LoRaWAN, or we can say using a cellular IoT network, whatever is in the communication protocol, and it sends all the data of that particular that particular controller to the central management system. All right. Then comes the system action. So the central management system, the CMS, it monitors, it aggregates data from all the poles across the city. It tracks the rigid load and instantly generate a digitized maintenance ticket which specify the exact GPS coordinate of any failed unit. And according to that, a system take action and make sure the failed units are corrected. They are taken out, or they are made sure to be removed. Also, it monitors the entire city grid, and it helps to reduce the manual work of manual checking, manual tracking, and we are able to analyze the city framework in a more concise format. Then comes the advantages and disadvantages. First, if we talk about advantages, the massive energy saving is the major advantage. So the smart metering could cut up the city power bills up to 30 to 40%, and operational efficiency by completing automated maintenance pipeline, and there is no need for manual intervention. So these are the two major advantages. Whereas there are few disadvantages as well, like it introduces heavy system complexity. It requires high skilled technical staff to maintain the hardware and the software layer. Plus, there is a total connectivity resilience. Okay, so if the wireless communication network drops out, the lights can get stuck in a permanent on and off state. So this can pose a severe public safety hazard as well. Okay, so these are the disadvantages. Let's move forward and quickly discuss our application number 3, that is e-health, or it is also known as digital healthcare. So digital healthcare or e-health is literally using IoT to save lives. Okay, so think about how healthcare used to work. What happened? A patient feels sick, a patient books an appointment, goes to the clinic, gets a snapshot, measurement of their vitals, but what happens during the other 99% of their life? So e-health moves the medical monitoring but of the hospital bed and put it directly into the patient via continuous wearable biosensors. Alright, so there is a moving hospital around you. So what is happening? We have remote vital monitoring. So we are tracking the heart rate, we are tracking the ECGs, we are tracking blood oxygen level and interstitial glucose level continuously for the patient, managing chronic conditions like diabetes or heart disease. So there is a remote vital monitoring, right? So there is no human intervention required for continuously monitor that. You have it with you. And then there is emergency alert system. So these wearables which you are having, IoT equipped wearables, they are with 3-axis accelerometers that can instantly spot a sudden fall event. For example, an elderly patient is living alone and he or she fall down. So what happens? The wearable would immediately identify that particular thing and raise an alarm to the concerned authorities. Then comes the smart medication. So the smart pill bottles or blister packs embedded with the sensor track when the cap is opened, and it is automatically logging if a critical patient has taken their prescription on time or not. right? So there is an complete system maintained for the betterment of that particular person using IoT. If we talk about the workflow, let's us understand how a heartbeat becomes a medical intervention. First, we talk about data acquisition. So a medical grade wearable sensor, like a continuous pulse oximeter, or we can say a chest strap, what it does, it reads raw physiological analog signals from your body and digitize it. Then connectivity. Because these devices sit on human body, they use ultra low power Bluetooth energy, which is BLE, to sync with the patient's nearby smartphone. So whatever signals are coming, it is sent to the smartphone. So the smartphone then act as a personal gateway and passing that data over 4G or 5G network over a secure medical cloud. Then comes the analytics. So in the cloud, there is sophisticated AI algorithms which are continuously streaming the data and looking for if there is any dangerous anomalies like cardiac arrest or something like that, or there is a drop in the oxygen, whatever. All right. And if there is any, it is notified. So the moment an anomaly crosses a dangerous clinical threshold, the system triggers a high priority alert to the doctor's dashboard or fires the automated emergency coordinates to the patient's family. So whatever the notifications are, it is performed. If we talk about the pros and cons, the pros are that there is a true monitoring, remote monitoring. So it cut down the unnecessary expensive hospital visits every day. It is, it is very efficient way. Then comes the early detection. So it catches the medical emergency before it becomes fatal. So it is very advantageous for elderly people or someone who has a, very harmful disease. Next comes the disadvantages. First is the data security. So data security is the massive vulnerability here. So the medical histories are very sensitive data and they are premium target for the cyber criminals. Okay. Additionally, the reliability issues like simple sensor calibration error can occur, or the battery can die. All right, or it might trigger a false alarm, or worse, it might miss an actual life threatening attack as well. So you cannot say something about how reliable that can be. All right. And then we'll talk about smart metering. Finally, let's look at what smart metering is. So remember the old days when a utility worker had to physically walk into your backyard and locate that dusty meter box and manually note down the numbers to generate a monthly electricity or water bill. It was so slow and prone to typo as well, and highly inefficient way of tracking whatever the meter says. So the smart meters are they are created for a continuous automated two-way communication between the utility grid provider and your home. All right. So what happens in this scenario? There is a dynamic pricing. So instead of a flat electricity rate, the utility provider updates the pricing, all right, throughout the day. So the consumer can see in their phone exactly when the power is cheapest, all right, and schedule the heavy appliances like washing machine or EV charging during those times. Second is the leak or the theft detection. So by matching the systemic grid supply numbers with individual household consumption data, so the system can instantly flag if there is any unexplained drop in the pressure or voltage, or if there is a pinpointing a water main burst or a illegal power line tap. So you're able to know where is the leakage or if it is a theft or not. So you are not paying for the energy you're not consuming, right? You are able to identify that. Then comes the automated billing. So we are eliminating the manual intervention by entirely switching to the wirelessly beaming, right, highly accurate real-time consumption matrices, which is directly related to the billing system. So there is a manual intervention that is eliminated using this. If we talk about the workflow, what is first of all happening? There is measurement. All right, so a solid state digital meters continuously measure the precise flow of electricity or water or gas at set intervals. For example, every 15 minutes it is measured, and it is completely ditching the manual dials. All right, there is no manual intervention over here. Then comes the communication. So the meter transmit this consumption data using a secure long range wireless infrastructure, all right, straight to the utility provider system. Then comes the billing and feedback. So the corporate server process the usage data and exact automated billing and push the live consumption analytics as well directly back to the consumer mobile app, that this is your consumption, you are using this much gas, this much electricity, this much water. All right, and then comes the grid management. So on a macro level, the utility provider analyze the real-time aggregated data from millions of homes and predict the peak demand, that all right, in the afternoons in the summer there's peak demand, they're high on ACs and everything. So they dynamically balance the supply grid to completely prevent the blackouts. So this data which is you are collecting from smart meters are very valuable for the management, who are able to predict when to supply more energy, when to reduce the energy, and they're able to manage the system. Then comes the pros and cons. If we talk about the advantage, there is an extreme billing accuracy that completely gets rid of human data entry or errors and the estimated bill. All right, and there is also a leak detection that prevents the massive resource loss as well. But here comes the disadvantage, that there is a distinct employment impact as well, as it reduces the need of traditional manual meter reading labor roles. So it reduces the employment and thus leads to unemployment in such poor or underdeveloped cities. It might be a issue. Then comes the network vulnerability. So you see, if there is a malicious actor, if there is a hacker who successfully compromises a smart meter network, they could theoretically gain the unauthorized access to these remotely disabled they can get the access to the meters, and they can disable the services for the entire region as well. They can lead to blackout as well by leaving a malicious code outside. All right, so these are the major disadvantages of smart metering. And that is a wrap on entire IoT syllabus. We have officially broken down all the important topics from the exam point of view. So do me a favor guys, if this video helped you a little bit, even a little bit, to clear up your confusion, smash that like button, share this video with your BCA batchmates who are scrambling to finish the syllabus, and hit that subscribe button with notification turned on. So we have a ton of videos coming along. In fact, we are doing a dedicated PYQ session as well. So thank you so much for tuning in. Watch the playlist to revise, study smart, and I'll see you all in the next video. Bye guys.